Sound check 1 2 3. Sound check 1 2 3.
Good morning and welcome to the Light Rail Transit Subcommittee meeting of November 15, 2024. Reminder that all electronic devices to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. And today, quorum is present for our meeting, and I call the meeting to order. In the room, we have Councillor Crutch, we have Member Diplock, we have Councillor Maureen Wilson, we have Member Omasic, we have Councillor Huang, Councillor Kassar, Member Braithwaite, and
sorry, no sign, Emily Walsh, Downtown Hamilton, BA.
thank you, Member Walsh. First up is on the screen we have Councillor Danko, we have Councillor Francis, and Member Andrus as well. Over to approval of the agenda. Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda, please?
Chair Nan, there is one change to the agenda. Item 8.1, recruiting additional LOT subcommittee advisors in order to facilitate consideration of climate justice, PED 24087A. The presentation was revised.
Thank you for that. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda as presented? Thank you, Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Kassar. All those in favor? Yeah, councillors are the only voting members, so you still indicate by e-scribe. Thank you for joining us, Sarah. Councillor Francis, if you could indicate your vote, please. And that carries. Thank you. Declarations of interest. All right. Thank you. Member Andrus, you have a declaration?
Yes, two non-disqualifying declarations on item 8.1, as it does mention some members of the Hamilton Community Benefits Network as potential advisors to this subcommittee, and 9.1, as we are actively engaged in conversations with Metrolinx and the City of Hamilton around community benefits and community supports programs.
Thank you. And those are non-disqualifying interests, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Any other interests to declare at this time, committee members? Seeing none, then we'll move on to approval of our minutes of our previous meeting from September 30th, 2024. May I please have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Crutch. Any discussion on the minutes, please? Seeing none, please indicate your vote. And that carries. Thank you. Okay, first up to staff presentations. 8.1 is recruiting additional LRT subcommittee advisors in order to facilitate consideration of climate justice, PED 24087A citywide. And there is, okay. Is there an overview and then an introduction of the staff team? Over to you, Director Lukasic.
Yes, good morning, Chair Nan. We have Beatrice Ikoko today presenting the report that provides direction on recruiting additional non-voting members to the LRT subcommittee.
Perfect, thank you. And while manager's tech is getting set up, when you're ready, Manager Ikoko.
Okay. Good morning, members of the LRT subcommittee, staff, and public. I am Beatrice Ikoko, Project Manager with the Office of Climate Change Initiatives in the General Manager's Office of Planning and Economic Development. Today's presentation concerns Today's presentation concerns recruiting additional non-voting advisors to the LRT subcommittee so as to facilitate the consideration of climate justice in the rollout of Hamilton's light rail transit infrastructure project. You would have seen the report PED 24087A citywide. The purpose of this report is to offer recommendations to the LRT subcommittee on tangible steps to facilitate the process of recruiting representatives of frontline communities to serve as non-voting advisors to the LRT subcommittee. Climate justice, I'm going to give a quick overview of what climate justice is and how it relates to the LRT project. Climate justice, or climate equity, as some call it, involves outcomes that address equity challenges surrounding climate change. Basically, equity means that our policy making, service delivery, and distribution of resources account for the different histories and challenges and needs of the people we serve. So climate justice prioritizes resources and support to the communities that burdened the most by climate change, those that contribute the least to climate change, and those who are most socially vulnerable to it. When it comes to the LRT project, this is a massive climate change mitigation opportunity that will help towards reaching the city's climate goals as laid out in Hamilton's Climate Action Strategy, with its potential not only to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promote active forms of transportation, but also support co-benefits such as stimulating business and economy, enhancing community vibrancy, and elevating health benefits, and so on. In this slide, I've summarized 3 equity dimensions of climate justice that will be the bedrock of a co-designed climate justice framework for City of Hamilton's climate-related work that is currently underway. Each of these dimensions apply to the LRT project. Recognitional equity, again, recognizing and prioritizing the needs of and the opportunities of frontline communities who are at risk of increased vulnerability or who have been historically ignored or underrepresented. So we can think about low-income people who are dependent on transit to get to work, to school, run errands. Can the LRT project ensure connectivity to reliable bus transit? How will the project account for displacement of populations or safety concerns of specific populations like Indigenous or Black people, or accessibility needs of people with disabilities? So that's a bit of an example of what that could look like. Distributive equity, distributing climate action benefits and diminishing burdens across diverse equity-owned communities. While the LRT is considered a climate action of tremendous impact, how would it diminish burdens on, say, youth or low-income people? How can we consider affordability to these cost-burdened populations? Could this project increase job opportunities, job creation, access to parks and green spaces for frontline communities? Could this project increase quality, affordable housing, stock and air transit stops? So these are all considerations for this dimension of climate equity, climate justice. And procedural equity, factoring in municipal decision-making processes, and who is involved in these processes to ensure the project reflects the needs, aspirations, and knowledge of impacted communities. This climate equity dimension is the focus of our report's recommendations today. So while we acknowledge the absence of a framework to guide these projects, the LRT is an opportunity to actionize the City of Hamilton's commitment to uplifting values of climate justice and thus ensuring that Hamilton's frontline communities play a central role in the just transformation of the systems that have established and continue to perpetuate the unequal burden of climate impacts. Frontline communities, to clarify, these are populations who are disproportionately impacted by climate change. Frontline communities include, but are not limited to, Indigenous people, communities of color, disabled people, low-income people, unhoused people, 2S LGBTQIA+. These populations and community groups face heightened climate vulnerability due to the cumulative impact of environmental harms and socioeconomic inequality, discrimination, racism, and so on, which limits their capacity to adapt, resist, or recover from climate impacts. Furthermore, existing disparities mean that unless the city equitably directs resources from our communities, they are less likely to share the benefits of climate action. So I'm going to switch on to slide 8. And here we have a sample list of Hamilton's frontline communities and the local groups that serve these communities. So I'd like to pause here to give a shout out to Carl Andrus and the folks at the Hamilton Community Benefits Network who have been instrumental really in identifying the critical need for equity considerations as relates to the LRT Hamilton project. And again, here's another additional groups that that focus on mobility justice. So we've included, and of course, this is not, this is the start of a list. There's a lot more groups that we can refer to. Again, we have some additional sources of support for recruitment. We've included here potential groups. So, of course, Office of Climate Change is definitely there, and Indigenous Relations Office, City's Public Engagement Team, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Accessibility Team here at City, and we have the City of Hamilton's Youth Strategy Team. And relevant City of Hamilton's advisory committees as well. We've listed a few here. Climate Change Advisory Committee, Seniors Advisory Committee, Accessibility Committee for Persons with Disabilities. Now moving on to the recommendation A, that the Light Rail Transit Subcommittee's terms of reference be amended to include additional non-voting community advisors to ensure that the subcommittee's composition reflects the community from a climate justice point of view as follows. Membership, and this wording was also provided through the clerk. Membership of the committee will consist of the mayor and councillors along the B-line corridor, additional councillors that represent various interests that should be on the subcommittee. These include a representative of the mountain and the rural suburban wards as well. This continues. Other representatives of the community, key stakeholders will be asked to attend as advisors to the subcommittee. These can include, but are not limited to, Chamber of Commerce, BIAs, HHHBA, institutional and business partners. Non-voting community advisors that reflect the community from a climate justice point of view. These advisors can include, but are not limited to, the urban Indigenous community, Black community, women, gender diverse individuals, 2S LGBTQIA+, youth, seniors, newcomer refugees, persons with disabilities, and low-income Hamiltonians. And then recommendation B, that staff be directed to proceed with efforts to recruit non-voting community advisors that reflect the community from a climate justice point of view to the Light Rail Transit Subcommittee, including reaching out to local organizations that offer support to frontline communities. I'd like to conclude this presentation by saying that light rail has become increasingly popular in cities across the world. According to one study, in North America, more than 16 LRT projects were planned in 2019 compared to 1 in 2012. 5 LRT networks came online in 2022 in North America, including Montreal's Réseau Express Métropolitain, REM. Hamilton's LRT could well be the first light rail transit system to intentionally embed equity within and across all phases of this exciting project. So thank you.
Thank you for that overview, Manager. Committee members, are there any questions? I'll get the speakers list started. Councillor Maureen Wilson.
My apologies. I think I may be off topic here in terms of my question, which was going to be around in seeking, this report is about embedding this in the work, correct? I did read the agenda, I did read the reports. My question was going to be in seeking feedback from community, perhaps to the clerk. Is that those who participate, are they bound by the same rules of conduct, for example, that?
Okay. So through the chair, the way I understand it is these are non-voting advisors that would be invited to join, to sit around the LRT subcommittee table. So I think that as far as being bound by the same, I'm struggling to answer that question because there are rules of conduct, but I know they're non-voting members, and I don't believe they have to attend every meeting, if that answers your question.
Thank you for your feedback. I think my question is, like local agencies and boards that are, those members are non-voting, they advise us, but they're subject to the code of conduct as it exists for the city of Hamilton. So that was my question.
To the clerk?
Through the chair to the clerk. Thank you.
That's correct, thanks.
They would be subject to the same code of conduct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mayor Horvath, followed by Member Andrus. I saw that the mayor's connection was a little wonky earlier this morning too, so we'll come back to the mayor. Next up is Member Andrus.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you both to the presenter, but also to the voting council members on the committee. I really like this report. I really enjoy the possibility of the inclusion of additional groups to this body to help provide feedback on this project. However, I share some challenges in the fact that this seems like the broadening of this work might be better served by a task force, especially through Hamilton's procedural bylaw, than it would be just adding additional members to this committee. That also might make it unwieldy for some meetings to proceed. And would ask, through the chair, both to staff, the clerk, and council itself, if there may be a better option whereby this subcommittee forms a task force itself that's charged specifically with dealing with community benefits and the environmental justice and disability justice aspects, wherein they would have an ability to receive reports, to vote on those reports, and then return those recommendations back to this committee.
Member Andrus, just to be clear, you're asking for responses to your question from the staff, the clerk, and council members of this committee?
It's a suggestion to council members of this committee and a question for staff and the clerk.
Okay, to the clerk first.
Through the chair, Carl, the committee, if it so chose, could strike a task force.
Okay, and then over to staff. In terms of the recommendation of having non-voting advisors fulfilling this mandate.
So through the chair, I see Director Sheikh.
Thank you.
Looking like he's got
Director,
the
if you
answer.
could, please go ahead.
Through the chair, my name is Abdul Sheikh, Director, Hamilton LRT Project Office. The purpose of today's report, just want to be clear, because this is a result from the motion came from my LRT subcommittee, where we were asked to look at only from climate justice lens perspective. So if there is, we did not look at the existing membership and beyond the climate justice lens perspective. If there is anything need to be added, then that could be added through the motion. But today's report is just only from the climate justice lens perspective. Thank you.
Thank you both. And I would say, as chair of the committee, the report is fulfilling the request by this committee. We do have non-voting members as is. It hasn't been unruly to date. We've been able to have really productive conversations, especially in some of the ones that are quite rigorous in terms of areas that we need to discuss things. And part of the goal, my understanding of the original motion, was to embed a climate justice lens into the work and deliberations of this committee. And I would be concerned, member, if I could, maybe I should have technically passed the chair to Vice Chair Kretsch. Thank you.
Got it.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, point of order. We have a speakers list.
We do? Okay, fair enough. I'll hold my comments. I'll take back the chair. Next up is the mayor, then it's Councillor Danko, then it's Councillor Wilson, and then it's myself. Okay. Over to the mayor.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it, and I apologize for being unable to pop in at the moment. I'm trying to multitask here this morning. My question was just about whether or not, as we look at the climate justice lens and who we might want to recruit to be advisors to this, non-voting advisors to this body, whether we look at how those voices can actually be accommodated to participate in the meetings. So this meeting is at 9:30 in the morning on a Friday morning. When I look at the lists of people who are to be considered perhaps as a possible advisors to the committee, I wonder whether the justice piece is not really being considered when many of those folks probably wouldn't be able to even attend at a 9:30 in the morning on a Friday meeting. So I just put that out there. Don't know whether it's already been considered by the folks who put the recommendation together, and I appreciate the report and the presentation, but I just want to put that on the radar as a as something that I think we need to think about as we get into the actual as the project becomes closer and closer. We need to really factor in how we make our meetings accessible if we want those voices around the table. Just that's all. Don't know if there's anybody that wants to comment to that, but it was something that struck me.
Yeah, through the chair, that's a really good point. And I agree that maybe they might have to have some flexibility. That's something that would have to be considered for sure, depending on who is selected or recruited.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Chair. So when this committee was struck, the terms of reference were very specific, that the councillors to be included were the councillors that have a direct impact in LRT, that they are on the B line, those 5 wards that border the route, and 1 mountain councillor and 1 rural councillor to make sure that there was representation from various areas of the city. And then the key stakeholders being Hamilton's core institutions and major organizations that have a significant interest in this project. And if I count the current membership, I believe there's already 20 members on this committee. So my question through you is, how many members is staff recommending to be actually sitting on the subcommittee?
Yeah. Through the chair to you, Councillor Danko. That's a question that we have been thinking about. Again, there are a lot of intersectionalities of concerns. So there may be an intersection between gender diverse and I would say low income. So there is opportunity also to combine. But I think at the same time, if the broader scope there is, and again, non-voting advisors don't typically have to come to every meeting because they're not part of quorum. So I think that there's an opportunity to not worry too much about that, the number of members, non-advisors to this committee, in the sense that there will be that intersectionality, there will be that difference of presence, whether or not the person can attend a specific meeting. So I believe that they'll still be having access to viewing documents and reports. I would say that I would like to say that I don't think this is. I think there's more strength in numbers and more representation with the diversity, the different needs. I hope that answers your question.
Councillor?
It doesn't really, because I mean, to have each member that is officially on this subcommittee has an opportunity to attend meetings and speak, and like I said, we already have 20 members. So what is there a cap? Is it 30? Is it 40? Is it unlimited?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Danko, I don't see that the terms of reference don't say there's a cap. So I'm not sure if that changes or not. But right now, as they stand, the terms of reference have not been. I don't see any concern about number.
There's no maximum
There's no
stated in the
maximum. That's right.
terms of reference. Thank you, Manager.
That's
Over
right.
to Director.
Through the chair, yes. So I just wanted to mention that there is no limit, what I understand from the City Clerk Office. As you see the recommendation, there are 2, first we are requesting to approve the terms of reference, what is included in the report, and then we will bring the list to the LRT subcommittee for approval, right? So our plan is that staff will reach out to those frontier communities to see their interests and where they would like to. So we will bring those information, whether they would like to attend every meeting and those kind of things. So hope is that the second report will have all those information for LRT subcommittee to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you. I guess I really agree with Member Carl Andrus that this would be a perfect opportunity for a task force that could be struck after hours. So I'll put that on the table as direction when we get to the report and speak to it then. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is myself, so I'll turn over the chair to Councillor Kretsch.
Thanks, I've got it.
Thank you. Through you, just to respond to the discussion that's on the table, but now I understand that Councillor Danko is bringing forward a motion or amendment to the direction to consider the task force. So just get clarity through the clerk. I was going to respond to what Member Andrus had inquired about, but would it be appropriate for me to hold my comments until there's formal amendment on the table? Thank you. Taking back the chair over to Member Walsh. No, Member Brenda Wilson. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you. I don't know the procedure. Is there a procedurally proper way that the advisors could meet separately? So you could have all those people, we could address the mayor's concern that it's not at a proper time, maybe it's an evening, maybe it's a weekend, and that we could, as the advisors, perhaps pick 2 or 3 people to represent the advisors and speak to the meeting so that it's not so heavy. Is that a compromise that could work? Could we have an advisory group that meets separately, that reports back to this subcommittee, and we don't have to have 30 or 40 people, but we've already had a separate meeting and we're representing them and their voices? Is that possible procedurally? Thank you.
So committee could direct that a task force be struck, and that would be the purpose of the task force.
Thank you. Next up, second time speakers, we have Councillor Wilson, followed by Member Andrus.
Thank you, and I neglected to thank you for the report. Just some logistical questions to make sure I fully understand. So who exactly would be tasked with the responsibility of finding, excuse me, these additional voices? And is there a selection process for them? Are there interviews, or is it just a sense of familiarity with them and that they are perhaps representative of some of the interests that are outlined in the report? I'm just trying to understand the process, please, through the chair.
So through the chair to you, Councillor Wilson, the staff will be responsible for assisting with that recruitment. We're really dependent on already established relationships as allies, as trusted allies. We know these trusted allies. So I believe that, again, the process would have to be, we have to work with the LRT subcommittee group to move this forward. But staff have been, as far as I understand it, is staff that will be helping with this piece to reach out to these trusted allies that we've already established relationships through various different, connections and programs that we already have. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. 1 second. Director Lukasik wanted to respond as well. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Just to elaborate a little bit more on what Beatrice has shared. So we have had conversations with staff in the LRT project office. So this would be a collaborative effort between our 2 teams, and within the Office of Climate Change Initiatives, we do already have work that's being planned to unfold soon to engage a lot of these frontline communities as part of the development of our climate justice framework. So as Beatrice has indicated, there are lots of organizations on that list that she shared that we will be reaching out to anyway to engage in conversation. So I know that the intent or the vision would be to potentially recruit in representatives from those organizations directly, or seek their advice and direction on recruiting in community members at large who might be good voices to bring to the table.
Thank you. And Director Sheikh.
And through the chair, just want to respond to Councillor Wilson's question about selection process. What I understand, I hope the clerk can confirm, there is no selection process to add non-advisor member. It will be by appointment. So the intention is that Climate Change Initiative Office and LRT Project Office with clerks work together to bring the second report, the interest from the frontline community, for LRT subcommittee to consider for appointment.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
So thank you for that. On that, excuse me, last piece by Director Sheikh, the expectation is that you'll be bringing a subsequent report, and in that report, will it be identifying individuals and/or associations, groups that have responded in the affirmative, or what is there approval being sought thereafter from the voting members of this committee? I'm just trying to understand the road ahead and what is being asked through the chair.
Through the chair, I think it was similar example like when SCBN was added, it was by voting by the LRT subcommittee member. So I hope clerk can confirm. So that's same thing we are expecting. Once staff bring the report, then LRT subcommittee can vote and appoint all or some of these recommendations from the report. But if clerk can confirm.
That's correct, Abdul, through the chair.
Counselor?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood that. So the recommendation report will be coming to this body. The voting members there will be an identified list of either individuals or agencies. I'm assuming there'll have to be some confidentiality around that. I'm sorry, I'm just not understanding through the chair.
Director?
Through the chair, as our recommendation number 2 mentioned, that we plan to engage all the frontline communities, and we will take advantage of the climate change, climate framework, what Office of Climate Change Initiative is already working on. So we were hoping that we will take advantage of that work is already be undertaken and talking to those frontline communities to see if they have interest, and bring the list of those members, what we believe from a staff perspective, to LRT subcommittee for consideration to become a non-advisor member.
Okay.
Thank you. Counselor, does that clarify?
Yes, thank you. My next question is back to the first question that I asked. Those members, there would be no requirement then that they attend every meeting. So we're not taking attendance. Would it be at their choice, and or if we think that there's something on the agenda that will require their comment? I'm just trying to better understand the scope of their responsibility and how it's exercised through the chair.
So I'm actually going to pass that question maybe through the chair to clerk, if that's possible.
Through the chair, you've got me stumped.
Okay, I'm just
The
perhaps.
director's offering a hand up as well, so maybe perhaps hearing from the director, and then we can hear from the clerk.
Through the chair, what we understand, there will be agenda available because we believe there will be some information coming through the design and other things, right? So, when community non-advisor member will see the agenda, and then, they will see their interest to be there, because when, for example, if staff is providing an update on the design, so it's probably some of the key non-advisor member to come and then bring that their input or voice their concern. So we were thinking that is going to go along with the agenda, the items what LRT Project Office is bringing to the subcommittee.
Okay, thank you. So back to, if I could, Mayor Horvath's question about the capacity or ability for folks to engage in what are normal, like this time, in the event that the individual or agency or a collection thereof are not available to meet the agenda item. I'm just looking for some feedback on the expectation that at some point in time, there may be issues that are time sensitive where decisions are going to have to be made. Is it the expectation that the decision will be held until such time as we reach consensus and or have attendance, or both?
So for the chair to Councillor Wilson, I believe that if I look at the terms of reference of the LRT subcommittee.
I'd rather it be asked here rather than figuring out later.
Okay, no problem. I think that maybe we're assuming things that maybe we haven't actually reached out to people yet, so we don't know what the assumptions are and what. But if we know that this is, as you said, like a timely situation where response is needed, I think that the people that are selected should have that commitment to seeing their interests presented and therefore be involved, be concerned and want to participate. So I don't know if it's fair to really make some assumptions that they may not be available. It's too early to really understand because we haven't even done that communication with them. So I feel...
If I can assist with the discussion, Steve Robichaud, Acting General Manager. Normally, when we're doing a recruitment for citizens to sit on an advisory committee, regardless of the capacity, we try to provide an orientation session so that they can understand the expectation of them. How many hours a week or a month would they be required to commit, and what would be their requirement to attend committee meetings? Once those additional advisors had been selected, we would do a more in-depth orientation with those advisor members so that they would better understand any potential conflict of interest considerations, et cetera, et cetera. As they're related to specific items on the agenda, obviously they would be provided with a copy of the agenda like any other member. It would be sort of a bit of onus on them in terms of reviewing the agenda and determining whether or not they wish to attend the meeting, or alternatively, as we've seen, they provide an email or other written comments if they're unable to attend the meeting, just to assist the voting members with having that additional perspective or lens in terms of the decision when a vote is required at the subcommittee. That would be my understanding as to how it would play out. There may be, we may as staff generally, if we're working on a report that's of particular interest to a member of an advisory committee or any subcommittee of council, it's not unusual for staff to reach out to them and say, hey, we're working on this report, it's going to this meeting date. If you want a briefing, we can arrange the time to meet with you to go over the report and just briefly tell you the direction that staff are proceeding. And then it'll be up to that individual committee member to, it's their decision if they wish to choose to attend or not to attend, much as the same way whether they wish to speak or not to speak to an item. But that is the way I would see it playing out moving forward with those additional advisors, and that would go for the existing non-voting advisors to this subcommittee. If they have questions on an issue and they want to discuss a report with staff after they receive the agenda, members are always feel free that they can reach out to staff if they're seeking clarification. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Acting General Manager. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, thank you. And to be clear, I'm not making any assumptions. I'm just trying to exercise my responsibility as governor, so I don't get into a situation of, well, maybe you should have asked that 2 meetings ago, Councillor Wilson. So if I've heard correctly, the staff will be making the selection. You'll be bringing the recommendation of the party to the next meeting. The individual or agency or substitute will be required to take the training that is required of any participant of a local board or agency. Gotcha. I think my final question has to do with, and again, it is hard to address hypotheticals, but in the expected code of conduct, I'm assuming that one of the, maybe I shouldn't assume, is it an assumption of when staff are selecting advisors that they will not do anything to obstruct the deliverable of the LRT through the chair?
So through the chair, I'm wondering if maybe someone else can answer that question, but I will try. As far as when you say, Councillor Wilson, if they will not disrupt the project, maybe can you clarify that piece as far as, yeah, thanks.
If I can, sorry, Steve, Councillor, I don't mean to interrupt. If my understanding, it is council's, council has decided to bring forward with the LRT, and we're working in partnership with Metrolinx to deliver the LRT. I think that would be explained to when the recruitment process, that it is here to implement council's decision and to provide advice on how best to implement council's decision, but to question the merits of council's decision or to seek to delay or frustrate council's decision, that would not be the mandate of these advisors, nor is it sort of the mandate, as I understand, of this subcommittee. It is really about ensuring that we can deliver on that council direction and working with Metrolinx to deliver the LRT in a timely fashion and ensuring that it is the best possible product and outcome for the city. That would be part of the orientation that we would be for the people before they decide to put their name forward to sit on the advisory committee, and reconfirming once they have been selected to sit on this committee in an advisory capacity as to what council's decision is and the direction under which we are operating in terms of delivering on the LRT, as opposed to discussing the merits of the LRT or how the LRT is to be delivered. Sorry, go ahead.
No, exactly. GM Robbie Chord mentioned. So the whole intention, as we mentioned in the report, the expectations. So we did provide some list because we see this is a shovel-ready project, right? So we are not going back to the zero in terms of design. So considering the shovel-ready nature of the project, so it depends upon what agenda item we are bringing, what item we are seeking from non-advisor member their input, right? So we did provide some list, which is included in our report.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. You're at time, so if you have one follow-up question.
I do, just a comment. Again, I am not ascribing any ill intent, bad faith, or motive, but I do think it is my responsibility as governor to ask these sometimes uncomfortable questions. And the detail that have just been provided to us, that those expectations will be set out in writing for any participant, I think is an important piece of information that needed to be offered. And I hope it will be, those kind of things will be part of the subsequent report in whatever form it comes, if approval is granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, we have Member Andrus for a second time.
Yes, thank you very much through the chair. So first thing I wanted to comment on was, of course, the great work that the Office of Climate Change has done in identifying a core group of community organizations, and to mention to this committee that through those organizations, they have interconnectivity to other organizations. And I think that's important to note that there's a broader reach there by that office working with, and the LRT office working with those groups to identify other groups that may not have been captured in this original city report when they bring back the final report for recommendation. And then again, just to reinforce my view that I think this work, like the Mayor's Task Force on Economic Recovery, might be better done in a task force that reports back to this committee, as opposed to trying to bring a whole bunch of members to even Councillor through the chair Wilson's point on perhaps some disruptive elements that may have an agenda against the project, or may choose to use their membership on this committee in a more disruptive manner. And the other thing that I wanted to mention as well for this committee's consideration is whatever direction you take in terms of adding extra community members to this, to staff's point, not every community member shows up to every meeting. They come out when there's an agenda item that's important to them, or that is something that they feel that their organization perhaps needs to comment on. So I'm not sure that we're going to get a chamber with like 50 people in it at every meeting coming out for every agenda item specifically, but that by maybe framing this in a different way with, for example, a task force, where we could pull those 30 or 40 or 50 people in and after hours, as opposed to a regularly scheduled council meeting, to meet and discuss and then refer recommendations back to this subcommittee. So I just wanted to kind of repeat that, regardless of the direction that the councillors on this committee wish to take, and also to congratulate staff again on doing excellent work on, framing a way to incorporate a climate justice lens and to invite voices that aren't traditionally heard from to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Andrus. And turning the chair over to Vice Chair Crutch.
Got it.
Thank you. So again, thank you to Manager Coco for the presentation and the entire Climate Office for your contributions towards the report, Director Lukasik, Director Sheikh, and also Acting GM for your responses to the questions. I think it's really helped clarify the recommendation from staff. As a committee member and also as chair and rotating chair, so I'll be back at the table very soon in the new year. What I really appreciate about the report is the goal of aiming to integrate the equity and climate lens to the deliberations of this committee. And I feel like there's often scenarios under which council strikes subcommittees or advisory groups, and unfortunately, those advisories deliberate without council members being present, and then submit recommendations for the appropriate subcommittee or standing committee to read the report, which I think fundamentally, from my perspective, takes away from the integration of the perspectives that are being shared. Because you're not part of the discussion then, right? And we're not listening and engaged in a dialogue and inquiring with each other about the perspectives that are being that are seeking to inform the deliberations of a subcommittee. So from that perspective, and from what I value most about deep integration equity work, is having folks at the table. And I think that from a governance perspective, there's a lot of merit in having strong chairs who are capable of facilitating a discussion with up to 25 people, with up to 45 people. And so from that perspective, perhaps I'm not so concerned about having a chamber full of people and having a very well-facilitated dialogue. So I really appreciate the recommendation of integration that's here. I think the mayor did raise a good point in terms of inclusion and whether the timing of the subcommittee is one that does facilitate the best practice. So I will definitely consider that in my deliberations and accepting the recommendations, and also any other amendments to come forward, and really appreciating the clarity around the orientation so that any non-voting advisor that's coming to the committee is very, very clear about their role and participation to the subcommittee as well. So thank you. Those are my comments. I'll take back the chair and recognize Member Braithwaite.
Thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to agree with what you just said. I think, as somebody who's been involved in LRT for a long time and has sat at this table for far too long, probably, there have been important times where I've had the opportunity to speak to a comment that's come up or something that's come up out of the blue to help put my input in. And I would be afraid of, if we formed a task force, if I wasn't able to be at that table and speak in a timely manner, that some things might slip through the cracks. So just to back up, I think having a task force perhaps for some part of this might work, but I think those of us who have been at this table, in my opinion, I would prefer to stay at this table. So just add that.
Thank you. So that exhausts the speakers list. Oh, no, Councillor Kassar. Thank you.
Sorry, I was trying to indicate, but it wasn't going through. I was going to hold comment to the report, but it looks like this is the appropriate time, so if you don't mind. I think the issue of time of day availability, as was raised by the mayor, is an important consideration. I think before any decision is made by staff, there should be outreach with those potential organizations to determine that, because we're making assumptions here, and assumptions can get us in a lot of trouble. I'm not personally biased either way to whether a task force, as has been suggested, or is the appropriate order to have everyone here, but I'm listening carefully to the feedback being provided. But I think we need to understand the availability, because if we're going to add a number of people, we need to ensure that we're not frustrating their ability to be here to provide their voice, because if we add them and they can't be here, then we're defeating the purpose. So one of the things that we may consider, and I only offer this as trying to find a compromise, is, well, one, I would say first, I think we need to determine a number of people. To leave it unlimited, yeah, maybe the terms of reference say that, Chair, but I think we need to understand what we're trying to achieve and how many people, how many organizations need to be represented. So I think we just have to define that. And secondly, it doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, need to be a large number of individuals that are here to represent those voices. You know, could it be 3, 4, 5? I don't know. I'm not trying to put us in a certain direction, but I don't think that we need to add, you know, double the size of the committee necessarily. But one thing to consider, would it be a compromise here to help address all the concerns here is add a small number of individuals as members to this committee, also strike a working group on which they participate to hear a broader voice and to bring those voices here to maybe be more efficient and address both of the concerns that have been raised or the number of concerns that have been raised here. I don't know. Well, anyway, I'll put that out there as a potential solution, but I think it's very, very important, the bottom line, that we do have voices who are able to have the input here. That's what I want to make sure we achieve. And I think we're on the same page. We're just struggling with the most efficient and effective way to do that. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Next up, we have Vice Chair.
Thanks. I think we're doing a little bit of cart and horse logistics today. I think it's fine for staff to go ahead, do this work, come back, and there's an approval process for us in terms of appointing people. If at the point we get to those names or those folks being put forward and we feel some crisis is emerging, then we can address the crisis at the time. But I think staff have heard what we've said, try not to make this unruly to the point where we wouldn't be able to manage the committee, right? Making sure that we consider things like hours when we're thinking about this, and if there's a barrier that we could come back, and they can come back with a recommendation at the end of this all. I trust that they're going to be able to do that just fine. And we can also determine how that selection process will ultimately end. And if we do see, there's 75 people being added to the committee, then I think at that point we could intervene. But I think we ought to let them just do their work and trust that they can do it competently.
Thank you. Okay, so that exhausts the speakers list. Thank you, Manager, for standing the whole time and integrating your presentation. And thank you to the staff for, I did give a little bit of leeway to get into some of the report contents and considerations as well. So at this point, we need a mover and seconder to receive the presentation. Moved by Vice Chair, seconded by Councillor Huang. All those in favor? Okay, that carries. And on to the report. May I have a mover and seconder to put the report formally on the table? Moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by myself, I guess. Oh, the Mayor. Thank you so much, Mayor Horvath. And so the report recommendations are on the table now. We'll open up the speakers list again. We have Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Chair. So as mentioned, I'll put an amending motion on the table for consideration by the subcommittee, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Francis, that the City of Hamilton strike a LRT Climate Justice Task Force that reflects the community from a climate justice point of view. Task Force members can include, but are not limited to, the urban Indigenous community, Black community, women, gender diverse individuals, 2S LGBTQIA+, youth, seniors, newcomers, refugees, persons with disabilities, and low-income Hamiltonians, and that staff be directed to proceed with efforts to recruit a LRT Climate Justice Task Force with efforts to recruit members that reflect the community from a climate justice point of view, including reaching out to local organizations that offer support to frontline communities. So just to speak to this, further to the discussion that we've already had, I think this is definitely valuable input that we need into this project. And I think striking a task force versus actually including members on the subcommittee would allow everyone that wants to participate access, because it could be an open membership. Meetings could certainly be held after hours. There can be an open and flexible membership, so it's much more informal. And a task force has a special governance structure within the city of Hamilton. Task force members have access to all staff reports. Task force members have access to staff, and they can also report directly to the subcommittee, not as a delegation, but as members of the task force. So I think, providing them with that structure is valuable. And I think it would achieve the intention of what is being proposed here, which is to include a broader spectrum of voices that want to have input on the LRT project. But at the same time, we haven't got into the actual nuts and bolts of LRT. The LRT subcommittee meetings that we've had to date have been leading up. We haven't even gone through procurement yet. So, I think it is valid that once we get into the actual nuts and bolts of building LRT as a construction and transportation and economic development project, the members that are already on this subcommittee are very well represented. And the work that this subcommittee is going to be doing as sort of a liaison between Metrolinx, between city staff, between the broader community and the remainder of council, that work is going to be much, much more involved once this project is actually underway in full. So I think leaving the subcommittee membership as it is reasonable, but bringing on a dedicated task force with those special governance duties that are involved is, I think, a reasonable solution and a reasonable way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, we have Councillor Huang, followed by Member Andrus.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question to clarify. As an amending motion, we would be going back to the report, and it would be C, all of what Councillor Danko just said. So we would be doing the work that has already been outlined, which is going through and identifying a potential and getting a report back. And we would also be striking a task force. I'm just trying to get clarity there. I think I'm asking the mover.
Yep, you are asking the mover. Councillor Danko, if you could clarify your intention of the motion, amending.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. The intention is to do exactly everything that is recommended in this report, because I think it is definitely valuable to do. The only difference is that instead of members being selected to the governance structure to sit on as standing members of a subcommittee, they would be they'd be standing members of a task force. But everything else, the intention would be to remain the same.
Okay. I'm a little confused then, because that means that that's a totally different motion than what is being asked in this report, which is doing a report back on finding a potential person that will ultimately be on this committee as an advisor, non-voting advisor. We don't know how many, but that's where the report back would speak to that. But again, just for clarity, Councillor Danko, your motion is essentially totally not taking any type of representative on to be on this committee and just instead striking a task force. I'm still confused.
It's worth clarifying structurally, as your inquiry is noted as chair in terms of the recommendations. The current recommendation does read from staff that the advisors would serve as non-voting community advisors to the LRT subcommittee. And Councillor Danko's amendment doesn't nor structurally change it. So Councillor Danko, if you could clarify, please.
So that would also then be amended, that the report back to identify members, you simply replace subcommittee with task force.
Councillor Huang?
Thank you for that clarification. I think that I'd like to understand procedurally, could I make a recommendation to say, keep the existing report back and directions within this report as is, but then add Councillor Danko's amendment, because I think that that's a great opportunity. I think the idea of having at least one person that has that climate justice lens, but perhaps they become that representative to a task force where we can include all of those voices separately and distinct, but that working group can still have that representative be here. Just as Susie had kind of mentioned, sometimes timing kind of sucks, and having that person be at this table to speak about those things in the moment, I think would be very valuable to this committee. So I'm asking if there's procedurally,
Yeah, so that you could ask a friendly amendment to the mover of the amending motion to consider what you've just said and further amend his emotion, not your emotions, but your motion.
which is, again, asking the mover to consider the exact recommendations within this report to continue to move forward, but then add your amending motion as an addition to strengthen that perspective and to make this a much more efficient and functioning subcommittee.
So that would be to you, Councillor Danko.
Thank you. I don't think we would have both. And I think there might be a little bit of confusion here about specifically what a task force is within the city's governance structure, because it is a specific thing. It's not an advisory committee. It's not a delegation. It has its own governance structure. So maybe I could just ask the clerk, as previously I've participated in the mayor's task force on COVID recovery. The task force has a mandate, it has an end date, and it also has a special relationship to the subcommittee that it reports to. So I think those concerns of having members sitting on the subcommittee representing a task force, I think is already addressed with the governance structure that a task force has. So maybe if we could just ask clerks if they could perhaps clarify a little bit better what a task force is and what their relationship to subcommittees and council is.
So, through the chair to Councillor Danko, the task force would have to you could develop a work plan for the task force and set parameters around what the task force is supposed to produce for the subcommittee.
Okay, so it would structurally be a task force of this subcommittee.
Of the subcommittee.
And would that structural task force have a seat back to the subcommittee, or is that, just to clarify Councillor Danko's question, what would the relationship be, but structurally be between the task force and the subcommittee?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think I really would need to consult with my colleagues to determine what the relationship would be.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Councillor Danko?
So I'll just speak from experience last term with there are several task force. Basically, the task force has to have a specific mandate and goal with a specific time frame. In this case, that would be delivery of LRT. And they also can either be invited by the subcommittee or request to present to the subcommittee or be present for discussions. And typically that would be the chair or vice chair of the task force. If you recall from the mayor's task force on COVID recovery, there was presentations and discussions involving the task force chair at regular intervals to GIC subcommittee, to the GIC standing committee. So in my mind, it would achieve the same function. You would have the chair, vice chair, or whomever wants to be involved in the task force, and they would have direct access to be able to participate in discussions at the subcommittee level. Also, similarly as a non-voting member, but a different level of participation than an advisory committee or a delegation. It's an elevated status.
Back to you, Councillor Huang.
Okay. I might have to go on for a second time because I'm not really sure how to formalize my thoughts right now, so thank you.
Yeah. And also, yeah, structural changes on the fly are difficult consideration and deliberation for any committee. Over to our speakers list. Next up, we have Councillor Crutch, and then second time would be Member Andrus. Thank you.
Just speaking against the amendment, we're a subcommittee already, so we're below a standing committee of council, the planning committee, we're a subcommittee, and now we want to create a task force of a subcommittee. Like, I just don't understand this. There's no harm in having more people here with voices to give us feedback on a transformational citywide project that will have a massive impact. I don't get it. Staff's recommendation is to make this committee's advisory group more inclusive. Great.
Thank you. Member Andrus?
Yeah, so again, I think that what might really help is to have staff bring back to this committee for all of us their recommendations for the terms of reference for the task force on how it might work, how it might operate, how it would include. I think this is maybe an issue that's not best solved today. Especially given some of the different questions by councillors on the committee. But having known a bunch of people who served on several city task forces, chairs were allowed to report back to GIC on a regular basis. They were even allowed media access. I feel like it's a better way to, especially giving us, having to meet at like, 9:30 or 9 o'clock on a Friday morning, a better way to create a more inclusive space for a broader group of individuals to participate. But I think this committee would be better served by perhaps a recommendation on what that task force might look like and what potential terms of reference might be for that committee, because obviously the mayor's task force on economic inclusion or economic recovery, had its own terms of reference, its own, as through the chair, Councillor Danko indicated, its own end date, its own outcomes. And I think that quantifying those things would really help solve some of the concerns that members of this committee have. I also just think that, yeah, it's great as a committee member for me to, chime up and ask staff questions sometimes, or especially on issues of concern for our organization or our organizational members. But not everyone has that capacity. Not everyone has the time to fully read every staff report, every single report with, 60-page appendices. And I think that task force would provide a more inclusive space for this work to be done for a broader group of people than just having them sit with the rest of the members of this committee. Not to undermine the capacity of other organizations or other people, but there's, as the mayor alluded to, there's timing issues, there's capacity issues. A lot of the not-for-profits that were mentioned in the staff report that were recommended for this committee have 1 or 2 staff members, tops, who could participate. Some of them are purely volunteer organizations. So I would like to see, if possible, councillors on this committee consider asking staff to look at what a task force would look like, what the terms of reference might look like, and see if it would answer some of the concerns that folks around the table have, and B, provide a more inclusive framework for the inclusion of the voices that this very staff report is trying to include.
Thank you, Member Andrus. Turning the chair over to Vice Chair Crutch so I can speak to the amending motion on the floor.
Now in the chair.
Thank you. Through you, I can't support the amendment. My preference would be very much aligned to what Councillor Huang began inquiring about, as well as the compromise that Councillor Kassar suggested, as well as the mayor's opening inquiry around making sure that the recommendations can be structured in a manner that enable participation and there's no barriers. So I won't be able to support the amendment, but I would consider a further one from any of my colleagues that kind of gives direction back to staff. As indicated, I think yourself, Councillor Crutch, you also mentioned in earlier comments providing direction to staff to bring back in their next report recommendations of addressing these structural issues that committee and advisors have mentioned. So those are my comments on this one. I'll take back the chair. There's nobody else on the Councillor Kassar.
Thanks, Chair Nan. I just want to express where I've landed on this. I think there's merit in this discussion. I think it's good to have different points of view. I think it's premature to make a structural decision at this point in time. I understand the case for the working group. I think it'll be appropriate for staff to take this away, consider the feedback, and come back. I'm not opposed to a working group. I understand as the merits that were explained and how it's worked in the past. I just think that we need that time to understand it, have a staff report, and then come back to it later.
Appreciate it. Okay. Second time, Councillor Danko. On your amendment.
Thank you, Chair. So considering the discussion, I think it is worthwhile to give staff an opportunity to report back on the terms of reference that a task force may have, along with methods of recruitment and training. So I will amend the direction that's on the floor, that instead of making the decision to strike a task force, that will ask staff to report back on options for terms of reference, including methods of recruitment for an LRT climate justice task force. And hopefully that will address some of the concerns from other members of this committee, and also give members of this committee that maybe haven't had the opportunity to participate in a task force governance structure an opportunity to talk to clerks about what that is and how it may work in this instance. So just I'll put that small change to the direction that's before you, that it's a report back on options for terms of reference, including recruitment for an LRT climate justice task force.
Okay. Do you have language sent to the clerk?
I can do that right now.
That would be appreciated, just acknowledging that we're amending an amending motion.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to be able to read it.
Okay, sent to all of you, including the clerk.
Okay, and for the benefit of non-voting members, if that could be put on the screen. And also for the benefit of staff, if they have any clarifying questions or comments on the amendment, which as chair I would appreciate. Thank you, Elsie McIntosh.
So it would just be the first paragraph out of that, I believe.
then we've got a lot of agenda items to get through in the last hour of this committee. Not even, right? We got an hour, yeah. Mayor, I'll add you to the speakers list once we see the amendment on the screen. And you would be after Councillor Maureen Wilson, who was on the speakers list before you. Okay, so the previous amendment is withdrawn, and this amendment is being put forward, moved by Councillor Danko, seconded by Councillor Francis, that a C be added to the recommendation report, that the city of Hamilton, or sorry, that staff report back on options for terms of reference, including recruitment for an LRT climate justice task force that reflects the community from a climate justice point of view. Task force members can include, but are not limited to, the urban Indigenous community, Black community, women, gender diverse individuals, Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+, youth, seniors, newcomers, refugees, persons with disabilities, and low-income Hamiltonians. And D, that staff be directed to proceed with efforts to recruit.
If I can, Chair, that second paragraph is not necessary.
Okay, so we're just adding a C?
No, this would be superseding A and B. A and B would be off the table and replaced with this direction.
So your amendment is to defeat staff's recommendation and replace it with this
Yeah, this is a
first paragraph.
This is
And
a
so just to
separate
clarify, sorry,
direction.
Councillor Danko, just need to clarify as chair with the clerk. So this is no longer an amending motion, adding another element of recommendation to staff. This is fundamentally changing the direction and recommendation. So this is no longer amending motion. Could you please clarify the procedure?
That's correct. So you would have to vote on the first motion. So if he's withdrawing his amendment, and he's putting a new motion on the floor.
Okay, so this is no longer an amending motion. This would be a new motion for subcommittee's consideration, and it would be sequenced after the staff report. Vote on the new motion first, and I just want to get clear on procedure here. So just give us a moment.
Let's vote on the staff report. And then you'll have a new motion on the floor.
Yeah. That would be my understanding in chair's procedures. So the report was moved and seconded first. The recommendations of the report would be considered by subcommittee first. Then any member of subcommittee has the privilege of bringing another motion to the floor. Okay. So hopefully, subcommittee members, are you clear? Are we clear about our path forward here in terms of decision-making? All right. Our first agenda item was the report, and then it will be the motion. So back to the speakers list. We're still on the report and its recommendations. Next up is Councillor Maureen Wilson, followed by the mayor.
Thank you. Well, I do appreciate that we have an agenda to get through. I think it's really, I feel, important for as much clarity on methods and modes of government to be brought earlier rather than later. So I do think these are all worthy, and I know you're not suggesting otherwise, but I think necessary discussions. And I think some of the clarity through the chair that was brought in answer to my questions, I think have to be registered somewhere, somehow. And whatever decision is made about how this is to be enacted, what I'm hearing is any opposition to the value of this kind of perspective, lens, advice, et cetera. It's how it is going to be brought. So my request, because we are on the main, the staff recommendations as presented, is wanting to see if we could add some kind of recommendation which would inform what the subsequent report is going to take, regardless of how this is operationalized and informed. So I would respectfully request that the next staff report in C, or it could be a new B, depending on how things go here, that we be provided with some information on method of selection, report back to this committee with names and/or agencies specifically, what training will be provided, and also just the clarification that I was seeking again as part of due diligence, what the party agent person, what their exact role is, just to ensure that we don't get into any kind of recognizing freedom of speech, but we don't get into a situation where a voice is brought that if we get to a point, they're there to obstruct. I'm just looking for that kind of guidance, details on the governance. Yes?
If I may, as your chair then, recommend that, I think what I hear you asking for is a integration into the report recommendations that staff take back subcommittee's deliberation and feedback, and in their next report back, add further considerations for subcommittee final decision on the integration of a climate equity body. I just want to honor that you're asking staff to bring back a report that addresses issues that have been raised by the subcommittee. And I'm trying to embed it within this discussion and get clarity from staff. And I'll pause here and just turn to the bench and say, is there anything you can offer as staff in terms of language for that recommendation?
Can I just interject with a quick point of order? I think what Councillor Maureen Wilson and other people are trying to do here is out of order. If you want to defer this and then have instructions for people to come back, that's totally in order to do. But we can't modify the report so that we don't take the recommendation in it until we voted on it. So I'm suggesting to people, if they want to defer this to have further deliberation, put a deferral motion on the floor.
Okay, point of order clarified. So over to the clerk, if we can just get some procedural clarity here.
Was that a motion to defer?
Oh, I'm not moving to defer. I'm saying everyone keeps saying the word defer without saying the word defer. So I'm suggesting politely that people, without saying the word defer, people just put the motion on the floor if they want us to have further deliberations and defer the decision today.
Okay, so Councillor Wilson still has the floor.
Yeah, I don't think I used the word defer or refer. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking for, I think, information in the next report, whatever recommendation seizes the day, and if now is not the appropriate time to ask for it, then you can put me back on the speaker's list. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is the mayor.
Thanks very much. I really do appreciate this discussion, but I think it does behoove us to refer this back to staff, considering all of the conversation that we've been having, to bring back options to this subcommittee that help us to come to land on a decision. So I'm happy. I don't think there's any urgency that we have to make this decision right now. I would rather that we make a decision that we all feel good about and comfortable with, and that takes into consideration the concerns raised by all of the voices around this table, voting members and not. And so I don't have a seconder, but I really do.
I'll happily second it, Mayor.
Time. It's a matter of treating this with the seriousness that it deserves, and not getting something off an agenda for the sake of it, but rather the opposite, coming to this subcommittee with something that is much more solid in terms of the path forward, with the understanding and the knowledge of what subcommittee members of all kinds have brought to the table here. I think it behooves us to really take our time to do this well, And so if I can find a seconder, I'm moving a deferral back to staff.
Thank
to
you.
Come back with recommendations that are reflective of options for the subcommittee to move forward in terms of ensuring that the climate justice lens is applied, or I don't know what the exact language should be, but I think you know where I'm coming from. And so if I can get a seconder for that.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so it would be a referral motion back to the clerk just to clarify and slow things down so that you can get the language in front of all of us. So refer the recommendation, report PED 24087 back to staff to bring options to the LRT subcommittee, considering its deliberations today. Would that suffice?
That would be perfect, I think.
Any further amendments or recommendations from staff for us to consider?
Through the chair, I think that's really a good discussion. I just wanted to clarify from clerks, because we do have a motion on floor from my LRT subcommittee, which asked about non-advisor to LRT subcommittee, and that came from LRT subcommittee. So we're gonna park that motion, and then we bring another report for the deliberation?
Or embed that within the referral?
Yeah, so we will bring another report which will have this option and along with the deliberation, and then we can recommend what staff believes, whether task force or non-advisor member.
Thank you. Okay. So it's moved by the mayor, seconded by many people, but we'll give it to Councillor Maureen Wilson. And do committee members need to see it, or are we okay? We're good to go? All right. It's moved and seconded. You're ready for your vote.
No, just question.
Just hold on 1 second. So for referral motions, only on instructions, correct? Okay. So there are speakers. Councillor Danko, are you wanting to speak on the instructions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So the instruction to report back with options, just to clarify, options means either A, adding additional members to the subcommittee, or B, striking a separate LRT climate justice task force. Those are the two options.
I don't hear them as limited as those two, but in terms of discussion on instructions, then I guess the clarity would go to the mayor.
Sure, and I would say leave it open to let me put it this way, I did not intend for it to be very, very prescriptive, option A, option B, but I do understand that we don't want to end up in the same situation that we're in today. So what I think we need to have specific recommendations coming back that reflect the discussion, including options of the way forward for the committee, for the subcommittee.
Thank you. Okay. Member Andrus on instructions for the referral.
Yeah, just a very, very quick comment to echo through the chair, Councillor Wilson's concerns around potentially disruptive members wherever they're selected for the LRT subcommittee. I have spent a decade in LRT activism and dealt with my share of abuse from people who are very strongly against this project. And there's a continued resurgence of movements against that. So I'm not suggesting that any of the groups selected by staff would be among those people, but I also
Andrus, I'm just going to pause you there because it's not actually, your comments are not actually furthering the instructions that are on the amending motion, so I'm going to rule you out of order. Okay, the motion is there. It is before committee. It's moved and seconded. And it's going on the screen. Thank you, Elsie McIntosh. That staff be directed to refer back, so the referral motion is that staff be directed to report to the LRT subcommittee to bring sorry. Let's just clean this up. Referral motion that staff be directed to report to the LRT subcommittee options that consider its deliberations today regarding.
So now, can I just say that what's being referred back is the report with the recommendation. So the report is being referred back to staff to come back with options that reflect the concerns raised by subcommittee members, both voting and non-voting at today's meeting, in order to provide more options to the committee for their consideration. Or if you want to include options around, more options around ensuring a climate justice lands or participation, or however you want to word that. But I just want to make sure that we know that we're sending the report back, because the report is including recommendations that we're not accepting here today, and we want those recommendations to be fleshed out based on the conversation that we've had. So that's what the instructions are meant to do. It's to refer back the report.
Refer back this report. Yep.
Right? I mean, unless that's not procedurally accurate, which I'm happy to stand down if that's the case, but we are referring back the report and recommendations and asking for something more wholesome, really, is what we're doing.
Okay, so refer back the report to staff
with directions to provide subcommittee with more options reflective of the discussion at subcommittee on this date. In order to provide more options. Hold on, stop typing. Refer back the report to staff with direction. It's actually refer the report back to staff with direction to provide the subcommittee with more options to include a climate justice voices reflective of the discussion at the subcommittee meeting. Does that make more sense for folks?
Mayor, if I could, as your chair, just say that staff did inquire about the previous motion that had clarity around integrating a climate equity lens to the work of the LRT subcommittee. So I think you're aiming to advance that with today's discussion for staff to bring back more options.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I would, as your chair, offer that then it would be refer the report to staff with direction to provide the subcommittee with more options to integrate a climate equity lens reflective of the discussion of subcommittee meeting today, as stated. Does that suffice, Mayor?
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Crystal clear. Before subcommittee. It's been moved and seconded by the mayor, moved by the mayor, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. Before committee for vote. Thank you, Elsie McIntosh, for doing all that on the fly. Anyone else needing to register their vote? The mayor, thumbs up. And that carries. Okay, onwards. Thank you. Next up are consent items. No, it's 8.2, terms of reference for a change tracking framework for the LRT, for the Hamilton LRT. PED Report 24207 citywide. We have Director Sheikh as well as Manager Shahia joining us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to thank the LRT subcommittee members for providing this opportunity. My name is Abdul Sheikh, Director, Hamilton LRT Project Office. I have Farhad Shahla with me, who is the Manager of Technical Services and Approvals Coordination with LRT Project Office. Today, we are here to present the terms of reference for a change tracking framework for the Hamilton Light Rail Transit Project. So this presentation is aligned with the report in front of you today, and I will provide a brief overview of a background of this work, and Farhad will cover the terms of reference and analysis and rationale as well. I will then end the presentation with a recommendation and next steps. So in terms of background, this presentation is a result of a motion first introduced by the LRT subcommittee in December last year, and then was approved on September 20th this year. This motion requires staff to develop the terms of reference for establishing a baseline measure that would enable the city to track changes over time with respect to a wide and comprehensive range of metrics, including economic, environmental, and social metrics. So today's report includes the terms of reference addressing this motion and also provides the next steps. So once the terms of reference are approved by the LRT subcommittee, we plan to bring a second report in 2025 with the final framework that will use to track changes along the LRT corridor during LRT implementation through its construction and operation. So I will now pass on to Farhad Shahla to go through the details of the terms of reference as provided in our report as Appendix A. Farhad.
Thank you, Director Sheikh. Good morning, members of the LRT subcommittee. My name is Farhad Shahla, Manager of LRT Technical Services and Approvals Coordination. As mentioned by Director Sheikh, the change tracking framework will be an important initiative to stay informed how the LRT will change the LRT corridor during the LRT implementation through its operation phase. The terms of reference is intended to outline how such framework is going to be created. It identifies the necessary steps, the approach, and the required approval and consultation. The terms of reference specifically informs how final set of indicators will be selected, provides how indicators will be defined, including their limitations and assumptions, and what endorsement and approvals will be required to finalize indicators, and suggests future reporting structure to this council. In terms of defining the corridor boundary, our preliminary review suggests that a general boundary 14 kilometers by 1.6 kilometers is reasonable. 14 kilometers is the length of the project, and 1.6 kilometers is a 0.8 kilometers radius, typically a walking distance that people are comfortable to complete in 10 minutes. This preliminary boundary is aligned with the boundaries recommended in the Major Transit Station Areas 2023 final report by the city's planning division. Subject to today's endorsement of the terms of reference, the suggested boundary will be further refined and confirmed. Throughout the terms of reference, you would have come across a number of key terms which are worth of more elaboration. The first are dimensions. Per the subject motion, dimensions refer to the three aspects, economic, environmental, and social, in which changes can occur over time. In other words, changes in the corridor will be multidimensional, and staff intend to keep a pulse on how every dimension will change over time during the course of the LRT implementation through its operation phase. Indicators are also used quite often in the report, and they are means of how each dimension can change quantitatively. Metrics are units defined for each indicator to help with reporting changes. The table to the right is an example from Region of Waterloo's Central Transit Corridor Monitoring Program from their 2022 report, where, for instance, indicators like transit ridership and daily transit activity are used to define mobility as one way of showing social changes. For the same table, the metric for transit ridership is the number of trips made using Grand River Transit in Region of Waterloo in millions. Service areas are different city divisions and sections comprising the City of Hamilton's organizational structures with expertise who will produce and report data, as well as interpretation of data where required. We need a realistic and meaningful set of indicators. The terms of reference provides details on the development of indicators and their metrics. LRT Project Office will validate and finalize a list of indicators within their respective dimensions, being mindful of council priorities and city building targets. We will define measurable indicators that will help with tracking change in a meaningful manner. We will investigate the existing service area capacity in terms of ability to produce and their reporting tools. We will work to gain a thorough understanding of known assumptions and limitations for data collection and reporting. And then we will also flag staffing and reporting implications. With no exception, consultation is an important part of the framework development and deployment for this exercise. To date, more than 30 separate interviews have been undertaken with internal city service areas to collect preliminary information. These service areas and many more will be closely consulted to confirm change indicators as well as data production and reporting needs. At key decision points, the city's internal steering committee and this subcommittee will be consulted for their endorsement. Additionally, reports and works completed by relevant external agencies have been reviewed and consulted to inform the generation of the change indicators as draft. Such reports are Region of Waterloo's ION Report Monitoring Change in the Central Transit Corridor 2022 report, as well as the 2023 City Lab McMaster Joint Report titled Getting Hamilton's LRT on the Right Track, their final report that was prepared for Hamilton Community Benefits Network. Our consultation to date has also included discussions with University of Toronto faculty members, and Metrolinx has been consulted for the development of the terms of reference, and we will continue working with them to get into finalization of the framework, data generation, and reporting. This office will also consult Moray Advisory Services to ensure we are benefiting from the relevant experience while developing the framework. There will be many other stakeholders that we will reach out as we learn more to ensure their feedback is incorporated. Once the tracking change framework is established, we anticipate two main reports coming to this subcommittee. The initial report will lead the creation, as part of the first initial report, LRT office will lead the creation of the first report that will set the baseline for economic, environmental, and social conditions in the LRT corridor boundary. We intend to present the baseline report late 2025. It's important to note that while the baseline is scheduled for reporting in 2025, the baseline year will be determined for individual indicators to best represent their specific current conditions, which could be either 2023 or 2024. The subsequent reports coming to this subcommittee will, once the baseline is set, the intent of the subsequent reports will be to report to this subcommittee on a consistent basis through subsequent reports with regular updates for indicators, focusing on significant changes observed over time, moving through the different phases of the project. Staff also need to use themed indicators during the change reporting phase, learning from other projects. Themed indicators are one-of-a-kind, one-time indicators that are created and reported for a particular year or for a particular project phase to respond to a unique circumstance, or if there's a special council request or an emerging topic. Themed indicators are uniquely defined and meant to provide data for special circumstances. These indicators will provide supplementary data above and beyond what the regular change indicators will provide. There's an example from Regional Waterloo Monitoring Program. Two indicators were explored by them in 2016 to inform their environmental dimension. The first was the length of trails and pathways, as well as the area of public green spaces. In addition to the basic features that will come as part of the change tracking framework, we foresee future opportunities for improved reporting and data display. For this, we intend to draw on the data collection and reporting tools that are currently in use citywide. As part of our preliminary investigation, we have come across data platforms and dashboard solutions currently in use for public viewing of city services. We will continue our investigation to ensure we are effectively leveraging current systems when reporting change within the LRT corridor. Furthermore, for future years, as we get into more regular change reporting, there may be an opportunity to investigate and explore automated data collection methods to increase efficiency in process and accuracy of the collected data. I would like to highlight, not needed for this audience, but for us to be reminded that change tracking is important for LRT corridor. Understanding how the corridor will change is essential to maximize the anticipated benefits that Hamilton LRT will bring to the city. This is achieved by means of using reliable data and improved transparency, informing how the LRT is shaping the corridor, and ultimately informing what city business decisions will need to be made to ensure ongoing efforts are complementing and supporting Hamilton LRT. Understanding how LRT corridor is changing over time compared to the remainder of the city. Furthermore, city service areas can benefit from the collected data to undertake their own performance monitoring to ensure alignment with their established targets. Or if they don't have targets, that would be an opportunity for them to explore defining targets for what they provide. In general, there is an opportunity for staff to learn from findings of change tracking to better plan for additional rapid transit initiatives in the city. And with all that, I'd like to pass this on to Director Sheikh to walk us through the remainder of the presentation. Thank you.
So thank you, Farhad. So drawing on information provided by Farhad, we are requesting two recommendations in our report. The first one regards to the terms of reference that are included in the report, Appendix A, which will be used to develop a framework and associated set of indicators for tracking change in the Hamilton LRT corridor. The second recommendation is to direct staff to refine the change tracking framework and report back to LRT subcommittee on a final set of recommended indicators and reporting structure in 2025. So upon approving the two recommendations, the staff plans to continue with stakeholder engagement and consultation to investigate the existing tracking capabilities. While we investigate with the stakeholder, staff will advance and finalize the change tracking framework in 2024-25. So once the framework is confirmed, then staff will seek internal approval from LRT steering committee members, which comprise of the directors across the city. We will then plan to bring our second report in 2025 to LRT subcommittee for their approval, which will include the final framework, the recommended indicators and reporting structure and staffing and reporting implication, if any. So this concludes our presentation, and I would like to thank the committee members for providing this opportunity, and Farhad especially working on the terms of reference. A number of staff were involved, especially our GM Robichaud, acting GM Robichaud, and Brian Hollingworth from Transportation Planning, who advise and guide us in preparation of this terms of reference. So we will be happy to provide any question the members have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sheikh and Manager Shala. Sorry, I mispronounced your name. I didn't see the L versus the I. In my brain, I saw I. Okay, speakers list is open. First up, we have Councillor Huang, followed by Member Andrus. Thank you.
Thank you for this. I'm thankful that Councillor Wilson put this forward because it gives us a good baseline for us to start speaking about these things. I wanted to ask a rudimentary question. In slide 8, you talked about tracking changes on a consistent basis. What does consistent basis really mean?
Through Madam Chair, consistent would be on a regular basis.
Yes.
Our intention at this point is to report on a yearly basis. It wouldn't be all indicators. It would be indicators where we have seen change. So that's what we have learned from other projects. They don't necessarily report every year for all indicators. They have a selected number of indicators for year 1, another set for the year 2, depending on where the changes have been.
Excellent. I just wanted to get that time frame because I didn't know what consistent meant, right? So second one is, as much as these are quantitative metrics, is there an opportunity to look at it from a soft metric sort of perspective, like sentiment of business owners along the corridor and how that might change throughout the project? Because I know that we're going to have that customer service aspect of it. So is there a way for us to track sentiment as the project goes along? Is that something we want to consider?
Yeah, through the chair, right now, sometimes it's very subjective in terms of qualitative analysis, right? So we thought, let's start with quantitative analysis where we can actually measure, like in percentages, numbers, dollar value, and those kind of things. But eventually, this is a long-term duration of tracking. So we will continue to refine and improve as we move forward.
Okay. So perhaps through you, Chair, just as a bug in the director's ear, is an opportunity for us to at least explore how do we track sentiment? Because I think that when we have our businesses, especially our business improvement areas that will be in the construction zones, we have several businesses that are also on the construction zone. I think even having that soft metric of how do we understand their perception, their frustrations, I think those also need to be presented in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not asking for it today, but I would like to have that be a bug in your ear for consideration as the future framework comes forward.
Through the chair, that's a really good suggestion. So when on our second report, we can look at that part and bring that recommendation, information.
Thank you. Those are all my questions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, we have Member Andrus.
Yes, thank you again for the presentation through the chair. This is good work, and I'm really looking forward to reading these over the years. A couple of key things that I noticed when going through the reports and the terms of reference. There isn't a lot of mention in your metrics of the monitoring of Metrolink's responsibilities through their 4-pillar program and how that information is going to be communicated back to this committee. I know it's a strictly Metrolink's responsibility, but I think it's important for this committee to know and see that Metrolinx is living up to the promises that they've stood in front of this committee many times to reassure us of. So question one is there room in both the change in the terms of reference and in your monitoring to provide more reporting on the Metrolinx portion? I know you're limited a little bit by the memorandum of understanding, but there has been some challenges from my peers in the Toronto Community Benefits Network in getting proper reporting from Metrolinx on those commitments. So I'll ask that question first.
Through the chair, Andrews member, a very good question. As we clearly mentioned in our report, this whole tracking framework is how it is influencing the other city initiatives, right? So it is not about how this project is implemented, because implementation of this project is a responsibility of Metrolinx and province through different regimes. So the whole intention of this tracking framework is how this project is influencing other areas, just like what we provided some example, like a ridership, investment, population employment, and other things. So that's the whole intention, but we believe, that how project is being implemented, that remains with Metrolinx and the province.
And thank you through the chair. I appreciate that. I guess my question is though around where the city feels that it might just do some tracking or monitoring of those commitments. I know that they're paying for the project and they're the partners, but they've promised 6,000 employment opportunities for Hamilton residents through their employment pillar. They've promised business support through pillar 2, and I think it's important for this committee and Hamilton residents to kind of have that information. And you guys have the closest inside track to that information than any of the rest of us would do. So I'm just curious if there's any possibility or plans to be able to bring some of whatever you can get from Metrolinx back to this committee on how they're fulfilling or living up to those promises.
Through the chair, again, we will, because this is going to go through the procurement process. So number of things which we need to discuss with Metrolinx, what could be shared publicly and other, because there are some confidentiality through the procurement process. But definitely we will take that information. We will discuss with Metrolinx what could be reported and those kind of things. We can bring back to when we are presenting the second report.
Thank you.
Two other quick comments I wanted to make on this is on the plans for your office and city communications staff to distill this information into something that's a little bit more community accessible. As you know, this has been a contentious project, and you're talking about providing a lot of metrics here, including city investments that are changing things like the inclusive communities section or the environment section on investments you might be making around the corridor or around the, especially around the MTSA areas which could include inclusionary zoning if passed by the city. So I'm curious if there's a broader communication plan to kind of distill this into, infographics and stuff that's a little bit more accessible to the public than, the standard city report.
And through the chair, and this is actually the second report, which that's the reason we did provide some of these. We completely understand because of lots of terminology being used, goals, indicator, matrices. The whole intention is, and then we provided some information from Waterloo Region Ion project to help the public. But again, like we will be continually looking at with the city manager office, they have the dashboard system. And as Farhad mentioned, that we will continue to explore whether it's going to be a simple report or is going to be a dashboard with the city. But this is going to take time, right? So we will investigate these information and we will bring those to the LRT subcommittee.
Thank you, Director. Member?
My last question, quickly, and thank you again through the chair, Director, for your answer is, and you mentioned it a little bit in the report, but the City of Hamilton has engaged in a pile of different initiatives that are often criticized by people in the community benefits network and activist groups around the negative challenges of the LRT. For example, our new anti-rent eviction bylaw or the tenant defense fund. If there's a way that you could link some of those other city investments, at least in the areas where they're affecting the Hamilton Light Rail project, to give the public a better picture of this project, and offset or mitigate some of the challenges that some folks have experienced because of it in areas where the city has already or will continue to make investments in offsetting some of those challenges.
Through the chair, this is the whole purpose of the framework, right? So that we can, as there was a discussion at the council last time as well, that we would like to bring the transparency. And once we have those data, then the city can program accordingly, the investment, and that's the whole reason of bringing this data up front. And then we can program accordingly, if there is anything negative, what city needs to do better, right? But this whole framework is going to bring a transparency to the public, how this project is influencing the other areas, and then how we can improve upon, or how we can mitigate some of the concerns creating from a result of this project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Member Walsh, thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of suggestions as to the metrics for tracking. I saw that a lot of the economic indicators tend to be very high level with dollars in millions in changes in assessed value and things like that. Given the amount of small business that's located along the route, I was curious if there's any way that you'd be able to track economic health of those small businesses in a more refined way. And then in addition, I'm a little concerned about some of the measures and their reliability. For example, the walkability is being measured in percent of population living in a high or very high walkable areas within the corridor. I feel that that measure could be conflated with changes in density versus changes in the walkability of those areas. So just to kind of drill down and get a very more minute view of these changes, I think could go a really long way towards being able to identify and then eventually mitigate any of those tension points along the corridor.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for the question. Many of the examples you saw in the report are coming from Region of Waterloo. We are learning how they're doing. It was only an indication, so we get a sense of how they have done. Obviously, we need to adopt our own dimensions of the units. And to your point, we need to be sensitive to what we have and adopt those indicators that would fit us. And absolutely, that would be part of our homework to go back and make sure the indicators and units that we define are matching, that serve our needs, that are meaningful, and that can be measured. Besides some of the items related to business, to get a soft sense of where the businesses are experiencing their feeling. Most part of the framework will work around quantitative changes within the corridor. to inform us on, for example, some of the questions on is Metrolinx pillars are being implemented. Once we know where the changes are, if we see a drop on a few things, then we get a sense of, oh, we need to inject something here, or we may need to mitigate in this area, or that not being served. So the change, observing the changes will inform what needs to be done. That what needs to be done is where many of the questions that came from the audience is secondary to what the tool will provide. And that's ultimately what we would like to see, to correct where we are falling or continue where we are seeing success.
Thank you, member. Good. Director, good.
Through the chair, I think Farhad has already explained, but as he mentioned that, we have already started discussion with 30 service areas, which includes economic development. So definitely we will be sitting with them and we will identify some of these requirements. Can we track these ones, or are you already doing it, right? So we will have to explore these one, what our capabilities are, what information we can bring, but definitely this has to go through an investigation process.
Thank you. And for a second time on this presentation, Member Andrus, and then we'll vote to receive and move to the report. Thank you.
So obviously we're pressed for time, so it's going to be a very quick question. Just under building improvements, you've looked at the dollar value of building improvements for property improvements in the CTC from 2011, which is a little far back, in my opinion, to go back versus, say, 2016 when the project was announced. But also, I think that for the public, that information would be better represented in the increase in property tax revenue being generated from that new land. And that if that could be included in the way that you are presenting this data, it would also help people better understand that this is an investment that is driving not only new construction and new jobs, but also new revenue for the city of Hamilton. A parking lot that's paying $10,000 a year is not nearly as good as a condominium paying, $1.2 million. And so I would like to see that better represented in your building improvement statistics. And I just think going back out to 2011 is a bit far, given especially how long LRT implementation has taken.
Through the chair, in terms of baseline, that has not been decided. So we will be working with service areas and we don't see it's going to go that far. So it's probably going to be, just before major construction, for example. That would be our baseline so that we can track going forward. In terms of other question about the tax, definitely, this is just the first report in terms of reference, and Farhad actually had already engaged with 30 service areas, and I believe taxing was another, service area which he's already in touch, but we will be exploring and what things could bring into the framework as an indicator. We will be bringing to the LRT subcommittee.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Member Andrus. And no further speakers, so thank you both for the presentation. At this point, if I could have a mover and seconder to receive the presentation, moved by Councillor Crutch, seconded by Councillor Kassar. It's before committee to vote to receive. My apologies. Oh, mover was Councillor Crutch, seconder was Councillor Kassar. Thank you, that carries. On to the report recommendation, same mover and seconder, before committee for vote. That carry, nope, I'm lying. It's not tabulated yet. Councillor Danko, if you can indicate your vote, and that carries, thank you. On to consent items. First up is A, information on potential grant and support programs related to the LRT Construction PED Report 24-182. May I please have a mover and seconder to receive the report? Moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Crutch. Any discussion? Councillor Huang, thank you.
Sal, just to let you know, Drina is interested in also being on the speakers list. Thank you for this report. I am thankful for the amount of work that went into it because it was very fulsome. It spanned literally all of Canada and into the United States. So I do have a couple of questions, and I'm going to pull up my questions that I had submitted to you earlier, but I'd like to just have them as an open sort of public discussion as well. Of all of these programs, what were some of the ones that staff was particularly drawn to? And is that part of what's the work plan to potentially examine, evaluate, and potentially move forward on any of these? Because I know that this is a snapshot in time for today, but I'm hoping to drive the conversation a little bit forward to be able to say, is there a particular program that we may want to put more resources to examine and see if there is a Hamilton context here? Through you, Chair.
Thank you. Through the chair, I think what will be really impactful going forward as the project proceeds closer to construction is liaison with the business improvement areas to ensure that the businesses are getting the support that they need. And by that, it would be, what we've seen from the research into best practices is supports for wayfinding, signage, understanding the projections, the construction schedule so that the businesses know when they will be affected. And I think that is the plan through Metrolinx LRT, that we would want to be cognizant of that schedule. Also to keep in mind, because a lot of the funding that we saw was from other levels of government, and is to pursue and explore what funding will be available as this project gets closer. And as Metrolinx had stated, it's too early at this point, but they did give an indication of normally, commonly what they provided to previous construction projects. So I think it would be good to keep track of that, and for whether it's council and staff to converse with Metrolinx and the LRT team to pursue those grant opportunities.
Thank you. Councillor?
One of the programs that I had that I was particularly interested in was Waterloo had worked with AECOM as their construction provider or their construction person. They provided a resource to help business members with like road closures and consultation and just kind of giving them a heads up on these sort of things. Is that something that we can potentially pursue as well? Through you, Chair?
Through the chair, yes, for sure. And I know Director Scheck probably has more information. I also have requested that Ed English from Public Works be on a call if there's any specific questions about roadway, that sort of thing. But I'll direct it to Scheck.
Through the chair, so maybe I will just provide, and then we can pass on to construction team from Public Works, and then we have Dennis Bruson as well. So obviously this, this project is being led by Metrolinx, and we still have to develop the whole communication strategy for construction phase. And I can tell you from my experience that there will be lots of information coming more than the Waterloo Iron project. For example, they have a community connector programs. They're convincing all the properties at interval times. They will also create a construction liaison committee where they will invite some of the businesses. They will have a monthly meeting providing those information. And, we as city have our own process, which Ed English or Dennis can provide further input. That road closure comes way in advance, like a couple of months in advance, right? So, these are the things which we will supplement the city standard process with Metrolinx standard process. In my opinion, is going to be a much better. And we also learn from other Eglinton Crosstown and Ontario LRT project, which could be more beneficial to this project. But I can ask if Public Works either Ed English can provide input, what is the city standard process in terms of road closure? Dennis Bruson is also here. He's full-time on LRT project. So anyone, if somebody's online, can provide a standard input. So Ed, to you first.
Yes, good morning through you, Chair. The city's construction services department does put out notifications on road closures, particularly well in advance on major thoroughfares, major projects where the public is affected. We've just this year started getting into the practice of providing a story map for these projects, which is an interactive website where you can look and see at different stages of the project. We provide updates on all of those on those projects as well as different phases through the project. And it doesn't just start, previous to construction starting. Those story maps are updated as we go through the project right through to its completion.
Thank you for that. My third question then, through you, Chair, is as we're speaking about financial incentives, as we're speaking about potentially tax relief or tax programs, I know that we already have SEPAs, and we have already identified most of the LRT route is along a existing SEPA. I think about Ward 4 and into Ward 5, where we actually don't have a SEPA that supports anything beyond Ottawa Street. So what's the plan for something like that as it relates to business supports and as it relates to this particular report?
Thank you, through the chair. You're correct. A lot of the LRT route is on the along the LRT route, and it is probably more on the east side that there's some gaps. So we could look at when we start reviewing our CIP, because we do it every 5 years. So in 2025, we're towards the last half of the year, we'll start reviewing our CIP with hopefully a report for a new CIP to council in the first or second quarter of 2026. So what we can do is look at that and incorporate any, when we do our best practices review and talk to you as well, council, and the community in terms of what changes might be made. If we have more specific questions about SEPA, I do have Senior Project Manager Caldwell here.
I know that Phil's going to be really busy, and he'll probably get a lot of inquiries from my office. And so the last bit is, after this report, what next? What's the next course of action then? Because I know that we're speaking in very sort of high level terms. We also did hear from Director Sheikh that there is already going to be a bunch coming forward. I just don't want to lose sight of what can be a Made in Hamilton type support for our local businesses. And I don't want to leave it in the hands of Metrolinx per se. So I'm thinking about it from a proactive sort of perspective. What is a potential next step given this report?
Through the chair, I think will be really important is to have regular communication between the LRT team with Metrolinx and economic development, so that I can relay concerns of businesses and the business improvement areas, and I can give that perspective. And like an example, last night attending the Downtown Hamilton BIA AGM, Metrolinx was there to give their update, and I was able to communicate with Metrolinx last night as well. So I think regular conversation so that we're all aligned in terms of what the goals are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Manager Lamb. Next up, we have Member Mazik.
Through the chair, thank you for the report. Just had one question. Don't know if you have any insight or clarification. The question around bonusing and the limitations. And the Toronto program, although it was federally funded, was still delivered by the municipality. Do we know how that was not considered bonusing?
From what I understand, to the chair, the City of Toronto funding, and I know City of Toronto have its own act compared to the Ontario Municipal Act, so sometimes their regulations are slightly different than what we're governed by. However, from what I understand, the funding that went to the business improvement area, which is a nonprofit and therefore would not be considered bonusing. So what we could not do is give direct to a business.
And so the Toronto program, just to confirm, was to the business
Business improvement area
rather
for
directly
promotion
business.
activities.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Member. And final speaker on the list is Member Andrus.
Yes, I'll be quick because I'm looking at the time here. So I have two, one question, one comment, I guess. The first comment is that a lot of the feedback that we heard from TCBN and from the Eglinton Crosstown was around communication protocols for small businesses, where just the parking of where a piece of construction equipment was put overnight had drastic impacts on their sales and on their businesses. And there was no direct communication channels with the contractors. You had to call the Metrolinx community engagement office, and it sometimes takes weeks to maybe get the contractor to not park that piece of equipment there and park it across the street or on a different lot. So in this, I'm wondering what the City of Hamilton's plan is to kind of work with Metrolinx to improve that problem. And my second comment / question is, a lot of the programs that are mentioned in here involve BIAs or chambers or other organizations, and there's a great many racialized businesses that are outside the catchment area of BIAs, especially, again, bringing up the Eglinton Crosstown example, who suffered immensely during LRT construction. It decimated their little Jamaica, killing, dozens and dozens of businesses down there. So I'm wondering, because we're talking about putting a climate justice and an equity justice lens in previous motions, what considerations are being given to the fact that there aren't just BIAs that deliver services. There are other perhaps community groups, et cetera, that are connected to these businesses, and how that's being considered in not just this report, but in future construction mitigation for businesses.
Through the chair, I'll start off and perhaps I'll turn it over to the LRT team. You're right. Right now there's probably 2 BIAs that are on the LRT route. Some others are close by, but a large part of the LRT route are not covered by BIA. So I would assume and expect that a lot of the communication plan should involve all businesses along the LRT route. And so that would be with Metrolinx and LRT as what is the engagement communication plan. And I would think parking is a big part of that. I know at the moment Metrolinx has a community office right at across the street within the BIA, but that anybody can actually attend and talk to the Metrolinx people when they're there. But I'll turn it over to the director.
Through the chair, thank you, Judy. As previously Judy mentioned, that we are planning to have regular meetings with Metrolinx City and Economic Development. And the plan is to look at all these opportunities, because Metrolinx has obligation towards a 4-pillar strategy, and one of the pillar is about business support. So we will be closely working with Metrolinx to add requirements into the project, whatever we can work together. And another thing is about contractor. You know, as you know, this Alliance project is different than other project what you have seen. Alliance project is, you know, all parties working collaboratively, city, Metrolinx, contractor, and others. So I think we have a great opportunity to sit together with the contractor to add what we believe is appropriate requirement of the project is, right? So those things will be working together with Metrolinx Economic Development and City.
Thank you, Director. Member Anders?
Thank you, and I appreciate your comments. I just wanted to, you know, make sure that those lines of communication need to be quick and tend not to be, and tend to be a little bureaucratic. So the faster that you can streamline that process, so that a contractor knows that, hey, maybe you can park, you know, that piece of heavy machinery across the street because this business owner has complained, would be good in your negotiations with Metrolinx and your ongoing conversations. That's my final comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Walsh?
In the report, I noticed that the Seattle example included some quantifiable measures of success for that specific initiative. And I'm just wondering if there's other data available or could be made available for measures of success of these other initiatives that are also in the report, so that we could better compare and contrast.
Through the chair, yeah, we can look, and especially with Fahad's previous presentation about measures, to look at what other measures we could use in terms of measuring effectiveness of whatever grant programs there are. You know, an example would be, let's say, the promotional campaigns is to see the outreach in terms of how many people we reach. So if there was another campaign, such as I've seen gift cards to encourage people to purchase within BIAs, as an example, is to see what the effectiveness of those campaigns are. So yes, we can look at different metrics that we've looked at the other cities.
Thank you.
Great. That exhausts our speakers list. So at this point, I'm looking for a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Huang. Oh, we already have that. Thank you. Awesome. Vote. That carries. Thank you. On to notices of motion. I will relinquish the chair to our vice chair, as I want to introduce a motion that'll stay as a notice of motion. So through you, and if I could please ask Elsie McIntosh to put it on the screen. Thank you. So for committee's consideration, next committee meeting, whereas as owners of the Hamilton Light Rail Transit Project, Metrolinx is responsible for project procurement, scheduling, and delivery. And whereas the Hamilton Light Rail Transit Subcommittee's mandate includes providing input and guidance to the LRT office project team on significant issues and decisions, as well as engage the broader community on a regular basis throughout the design, planning, and construction process of the LRT. And whereas the LRT Subcommittee is the most direct source of official updates for residents of the City of Hamilton, therefore be it resolved that the City of Hamilton requests that staff from Metrolinx attend the LRT Subcommittee on a regular basis to provide updates on project milestones and the overall progress of the project, to inform and educate residents about the project, and to leverage an opportunity to understand better the areas impacted. So I'll leave it as is for committee's consideration next meeting. I'll take back the chair. Any other notices of motion, committee members? Seeing none, we'll move on to general information and other business. Are there any? Seeing none, we'll move on to accepting the closed session minutes of September 20th. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the closed session minutes? Moved by Councillor Huang, second by Councillor Francis. If we need any discussion on the minutes, we have to go into close. So seeing none, seeing none. That will require an electronic vote. And that carries, thank you. On to adjournment. May I please have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by, Councillor Crutch. Awesome. Anybody opposed? Please vote. Thank you to all of our subcommittee members for your attendance and deliberations today. Thank you, staff, for all of your preparation for today's meeting. Thank you to the clerk's team for all your technical and procedural support today. Thank you. Carried. Bye.